Okay, folks. So I'm Vikram Rao, and this book is called A Stranger in No Land, subtitled Tales of Assimilation. So it's just a bunch of vignettes. Every time something interesting happened, I took notes over the years. And although I'm an engineer by education, I like to write, which is odd, but okay. And so this is my first non-technical book I've written on my fifth technical book right now, due to come out next month. And I'm going to give a talk to you guys later this month, roughly on that topic. Yeah, September 19th. The topic is going to be something like is a carbon-free grid realistic? Is that what it is? I said something like that, right? Small modular reactors, yes. Who knows what I'm talking about? He knows because he... Give me mic, I will talk. So this is one of those things. So, anyway, here's how we'll do this one. This is supposed to be a reading for 30 minutes, but what I plan to do is go for roughly 20, and then let's chat. Let's chat about what you heard, or any comments you have, or anything like that. And if you, as I do in most lecturing situations, if nobody wants to discuss anything, I've got backup reading. Usually that doesn't happen because, well, we'll see how it goes. All right. So let's get going. So this book, the most interesting thing about this book for me is the fact that my grandniece, my niece's daughter, illustrated the book. So I'm going to start with, and for me that was a big deal, and actually got the book off its behind, okay? I mean, I had been sort of wanting to do it, but once I got her on board to illustrate it, it got going. So let me start with reading the acknowledgement. By the way, Amazon gives you a sneak peek at the books, and the sneak peek has the first part of the book, like they always do, and then they stop. They jump to the back to the acknowledgements. I have never seen that happen before. So I thought maybe they found some reason to do that, and also because I wanted you to hear what I said in acknowledgement to my grandniece. To say that Nidhi Pandit, that's her name, has been a joy to work with on illustrations for this book is an understatement, in the same league as describing the Beatles as successful musicians. Your grandniece illustrated your book. How cool is that? Besides, the book, which had languished for years, got a huge boost from my discovery of Nidhi's talent. And then followed a comfortable partnership. I might well have created a monster. Now, would-be authors in the extended family will be emboldened by access to an excellent illustrator in the family. I ought to write a small monograph on learning to say no, in quotes, illustrated, of course. So that's my dedication, acknowledgement to her. I'm going to start with the preface of the book, or a bit of the preface. So I'm going to read you bits and pieces that I think are interesting, and we'll go from there. Preface. Quotes. People are strange when you are a stranger, unquote. Many of you are old enough, but it's the Doors from their song, People Are Strange, written by Robbie Krieger and Jim Morrison. The reason we say written by, whenever you make a quote in a book, if you don't give it the proper attribution, they come after you. And then in the back, you got to say 7-inch disc, year 1971, all that, but you don't want to know that. Okay. Just in case when you write your next book, and if you want to use a song quote, you have to do that. As the Doors songline goes, a stranger in a new land will be faced with strange behavior. The episode described in if it moves, was the author's introduction to the stark contrast in sexuality in California in the 1960s to the experience of a 21-year-old from an all-boys, at the time, Indian Institute of Technology in sleepy Madras. The term culture shock about defines it. These shocks can range from the essentially pleasant and intriguing, as was this one, to the shocking. But they all share the trait of a feeling of inadequacy, of a lack of preparedness. In this situation, the stranger has two choices. One is capitulation. He or she simply returns home. This may not be a physical return. It could merely entail making a choice not to be involved in said activity. In this context, home is a zone of comfort. Similarly, the interpretation of land in the book title would be a place or pursuit, public speaking, for example, not necessarily a country. When I, the author, was a child, the capitulation option was not available when the family moved every couple of years on postings. Children of such professional nomads, affectionately known the world over as army brats, are reduced to the second choice: assimilate. Minor avoidances are possible, such as school changes, but primarily one simply fits in. Personality differences affect the ability to fit. I was blessed with malleability, and the childhood experiences served to inspire confidence that I would not be a stranger in any land for too long. By the way, I will admit to you one little bit of bait and switch. The Stranger in No Land is intended for you to evoke the image of Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. I'm sorry, but that's called marketing, okay? So somebody who sees that might say, geez, Heinlein might have written this, but he did not, okay? All right, so we just then go to one of the next chapters. And the chapter is entitled 49 Not Out. And that chapter is my experience in college. So I was 16 when I went to college, 2 days train ride away. So pretty big deal. So assimilation was in play here, okay, because you leave home when you're 16. Our institution was a bit different than most in being small, with an entering class at the time of only 120 students that comprised mostly of motivated high achievers. In this setting, expressions of protest from students that may have been commonplace elsewhere were not expected. Then it happened. We decided to go on strike. That is to say, en masse, not go to classes, because there was inadequate water in the dormitories. I have no recollection of whether it was water pressure or the total lack of water for periods of time. I do not think that was the point anyway. I suspect that we primarily wanted to escape the nerd image and be more like the rest, quotes. If this sounds sophomoric, well, we were sophomores, if memory serves. But we were really not very good at this sort of thing. We neglected to seek counsel from members of the rest. An operation such as this requires a strong leader with fierce conviction. Sadly, we had no such person and were in retreat in short order. The conviction bit was particularly hard considering the less than momentous issue, the water bit. Professor Sengupta, the director, essentially the president of the institute, assembled the entire student population. There were only 2 classes at that time, 2 of 120 each. He was not pleased. We numbered just around 200 so he could be heard clearly without artificial aids. On that occasion, I think 1,000 would have heard him. He had a lot to say, none of it memorable. He then thundered. People think you are the cream of the Indian high school system. You are not the cream, you are the scum, though both rise to the top. This magnificent turn of phrase needed an imaginative sequel. I used to write a caricature column in Campus Times, which is the campus monthly, which is described earlier in the book, so I have to give you a little bit of background. I would write the caricature of a campus figure of some standing, and a classmate, usually Sahasranamam, would draw a cartoon of the person being lampooned. Taking a modicum of risk, I remember writing one describing Professor Sengupta. For sure, we at least ran the cartoon in which we had the director in a cowherd's garb behind a butter churn with a blue-tinted visage, muttering, "This is not butter, this is scum." So those of you know, you royal, okay, you get butter, yeah. Ethnic humor. The Hindu deity Lord Krishna was tinted blue, a cowherd by terrestrial occupation, and often symbolically depicted churning for butter. The symbolism was lost on no one. To his credit and my considerable relief, the director took all this in stride. He helped that the whole episode had been laughable anyway. Few in the class remember the issue, but since Professor Sengupta's acerbic wit and his caricature live on, that is the way it should be. By the way, all of us who ran that monthly, we lived in fear, but we didn't get expelled. We were irreverent, but respectfully irreverent, we thought. Got away with it. Okay, next chapter is, watching the clock, is called Folded or Crumpled. If we have time, I'll tell you why it is folded or crumpled, but I'm going to read a different part of it, which does not elucidate on the point of folded or crumpled. We'll make the time because it's really fun. Okay, so anyway, for some reason I picked this. I mean, this is the way it goes. Our company was the leading producer of lead pellets for shotgun shells, primarily intended for reloaders, not retail. While not a hunter or ski scooter, that's me, I quickly learned the language. The best performing shot held a tight pattern and cut feathers, quotes, more effectively. When a shot leaves the gun, the pellets most preferably stay bunched together in what is known as a pattern. A tight pattern is one with minimal flaring. The term cutting feather needs no explanation. This was desirable, not by the bird. I designed lead alloys to improve performance in each of these areas. Throughout my professional life, this experience has come in handy when making small talk with hunters, of whom there are many in my chosen field of oil and gas. That used to be my chosen field, now I'm retired. We're not talking about full-fledged membership into the brotherhood of good old boys from Louisiana, but we are talking about a one-time guest pass. During my tenure in New Jersey, the laws began changing on hunting equipment. This is in the early 70s. When shooting at flyways of certain species, the hunter was obliged to use steel shot rather than lead. Lead shots that did not make the target, which is largely the case, often landed in shallow bodies of water frequented by ducks. Ducks pick up pebbles from marshes and use them to grind their food in the gullet. Lead pellets had the feel of pebbles. They select on feel, not on sight, I'm told. And when used, led to poisoning. However, steel pellets were despised by hunters because they had a poor pattern due to lower density than lead. Parentheses, lighter objects of the same size will disperse more, hence the loss of pattern. Also, steel was believed to damage the gun barrel. I set about inventing a lead shot that got around the duck ingestion problem. This is what nuevo researchers do. Test their metal against new problems. I decided to formulate a lead pellet which would disintegrate in the marsh setting. It would mostly comprise metallic lead, so the particles would not dissolve in the marsh water. They would just fall apart into little pieces and no longer feeling like pebbles. I was part of the way through the invention when I ran it by a salesman. "Are you a hunter?" he asked. "Never handled a gun," was the response he was expecting and was not disappointed. "What happens when you cook the bird?" he asked. The answer to his question was not pretty. The shot would more than likely disintegrate in the presence of moisture at those temperatures. The bird had long since ceased to be concerned with death as a fate. The consuming humans, on the other hand, would face a bleak future. And not just any humans, customers. Reducing the population of customers is not good business. Eating crow occasionally, and ducks will appreciate the irony of the analogy, is the price of conducting research. The trick is not to make a habit of it. Okay, so we now move to something else. Yes. So this one is from chapters called When Cultures Cross. So the book, so I'll parenthetically, no parentheses, we're approaching our 20 minutes, although we started a bit later. Okay. All right, we'll just keep going. Then the parentheses will come later. I sometimes stayed at the Cheltenham Manor House, this is in England. I may not have the name right, but memory of the place is indelible. When visiting our research facility, the word stately describes it perfectly. Sweeping steps up to a mammoth door, complete with ornate bronze knockers. That first time, I was absurdly reminded of Dr. Frederick Frankenstein in Young Frankenstein, 1974, in his famous exclamation, "What knockers?" upon approaching one such door. The lovely and amply endowed Inga next to him then goes, "Why, thank you, doctor." Sadly, no blonde bombshell accompanied me on my first sortie into the manor, or any later one for that matter. What did accompany me was a small plastic shopping bag with lurid orange vertical stripes. That was the extent of my luggage. The rest was wending its way from the airport, having been trapped in the maws of the airline baggage handling system. This bag had simply toiletry essentials. At the check-in desk, which, as befitted an establishment of decorum, was in fact a real desk, with a well-coiffed person behind it, not the garden variety counter. I was approached by a portly gentleman in an impeccable suit. He wished to help me with my luggage. In a fit of impishness, and yes, a little pushback against British pomp, I was younger then, I handed him my plastic bag. Store bags are all cheap looking. I speak of corner stores such as the one which was home to this bag before I came into possession, not the substantial ones from Harrods and Saks Fifth Avenue and the likes. One of those, and say a hat box, would have been completely at home in this setting and situation. But no, mine was not simply flimsy looking. It somehow had that indefinably cheap look, completely devoid of taste. I think the orange stripes had much to do with that. The gentleman did not lose a whit of composure. His posture remained erect, and he simply took the bag. In the retelling downstairs, as in the TV program Upstairs, Downstairs, there's no doubt this was attributed to the ugly American persona. By the way, notice I'm being considered American now, long since shifted from my previous assimilations, okay? With me was my direct report, Brian White, the director of our research center. He was merely amused, familiar with the circumstances of the bag, but not forthcoming explanation, which in all fairness was not sought. But he was from Yorkshire, with accent to boot, so decidedly not old school Thai Etonian. This was also early in our acquaintance. He had inherited me as a boss shortly prior to this visit. The tedium of his next staff meeting very likely was relieved in some measure by a version of this episode. This is Cheltenham Manor. There's more on that, but we will see how time goes. Okay. Actually, that is the last one, and we are at 20 minutes-ish. So let's chat about anything, otherwise I'll do 2 more readings. See, don't do that in auction. You almost went up like this, okay? Gentlemen on the aisle here. Then they will ask you. Surely, yes.
In your book, I got your book from our library here and did read it, and you mentioned several times about your flexibility in dealing with assimilating to, I presume you mean general American culture, but obviously you're in a very specific area of American culture. That is highly educated academic culture in America. But I wonder if you'd comment something about the assimilation process as you have experienced it.
Okay, so the question was for the recording, can you comment on assimilation and what approaches you used, essentially? And he says he's read the book. So that means that he'll verify what I say. Yeah, so the approach, and because we moved every 3 years, it was not just, India is a country by name only. It's really a continent masquerading as a country. And so the cultures change, and the people change, and the languages change. So the technique that I used, by and large, was to try and understand what it was that the people I wanted to mix with, what they were interested in. So, before coming to America, I learned baseball. And so when I arrived at Stanford, it was in October. The Stanford starts late in October, and the World Series was just about to happen. And I was able to be in front of the television and be in there and understand who Sandy Koufax was, and pitching in Mudcat Grant, and I knew the rules. And it's hugely different. It's hugely different. You can actually talk informally, and suddenly you're friends. So then I discovered that was fine, but I had to learn American football, and I did, and off you go. So basically what it comes down to is that you want to be able to be friends with folks, and so the first assimilation you do is of what they value as casual. And that's what I did in most situations. And there's a funny story on the Folded and Crumpled along those lines. But the rule is just that: figure out what it is that they want to chat with you about, because chatting is what it's all about, And then you assimilate, and then you learn more. That's how I found out. Oh well, baseball was fine, but you better learn about American football, and I did, And so sports is probably with males, but you would be surprised even with women to the degree to which they'll do sports. So, for example, my wife Susan, she obviously pays attention when you don't notice, okay? But so when we had the first child, when we had second one, it was going to be twins. She used the perfect basketball analogy. She said, the two of us will have to go from man-to-man to zone defense. What? She's an Australian. She's not supposed to know basketball, okay? But you assimilate. What else? Well, then you are forcing me to... We started 3 minutes late, so I can do a read. Which one shall I read? That one? Oh, no, I'll do this one. When my parents visited us in Houston in the mid-'80s, Mummy's, that's what I called her, ability to assimilate was sorely tested, and she was not found wanting. At first, Susan wore only pants. That's Susan. Mummy said, "You wear only pants. Don't you have skirts?" "I do," responded Susan, "but I have not been wearing them out of respect for Indian traditions." "You are in the U.S., stated Mummy. Besides, you have excellent legs to show." That was a holy smokes mother-in-law moment. Something short of if you have it flaunted, but a big wow. Later during the stay, Susan, now pregnant, returned from a visit from the obstetrician. I'm not sure she's going to appreciate all this being said, but it's in the book anyway, so what? When asked how it went, I responded, "All fine with the pregnancy, but Susan is going to have twins." To which Mummy reverted to form. She was an artist and replied, "Nonsense! We don't have twins in our family." "Mummy, we saw 2 heads, 2 sets of limbs," said I. And then in a fit of impishness, added, "and 2 penises." Not breaking stride for a moment, she said, "I was hoping for a girl to break this money-gay boy's curse. 2 would have been even better." She was referring to our extended family having a preponderance of males. Of us 8 cousins, only 1 is a girl. More interesting was how she ignored the crudity while absorbing the underlying facts. Just had to throw that out. This is dedicated to my mother, but I'll tell you, you'll see an interesting comment there, how I dedicated it. To my mother, Vasanti V. Rao, artist, I owe my love of gardening to her. I think she would have been pleased with this volume, despite a frown at a couple of spots. She was a great mother when it counted. Little backhanded, but not too bad, I think. We are at, where's Joe? What do I have? 2 more minutes or not? 2 more. What do I get for 2 more? You don't get anything for 2 more. You get a question is what you do. So there was another Army brat from the audience who said that she too was one, and yes, adaptation was essentially survival. The interesting thing we found out from a psychologist, Susan's Australian and I'm Indian, and at one point we considered relocating to Australia, and the psychologist told us, if you move because your job has to move, children will handle it. But if you you choose to move, it won't go that well. Interesting point. So yes, so Army brats, because they knew that sustenance, food on the table required movement, they handled it. But if the parents are seemingly capricious and move for other reasons, in fact, our oldest son, who was 12 at the time, who reflected on the possibility, said, "Mommy, Daddy, Colin Mitchell and I are Americans. We will choose to stay in America." Oh, okay. Got the message. So I think Joe is going to pull the plug.